So when we look at Solomon's life as a whole, it's pretty depressing, right? I mean, he begins in an amazing way, humble, seeking the Lord, fearing the Lord, ruling justly over God's people, and all the peoples of the earth are coming and being blessed through him and through the people of Israel. But he ends as an abject failure and an idolater. In fact, even spending his latter days trying to kill someone that God has chosen specifically to be a future king, Jeroboam. Now, the difference between Solomon and Saul, right, because they basically end up in the same place, the difference is God's covenant that he made with David, right? God told David, your sons are going to sit on the throne, and if your son sins, I'll discipline him, but I will not remove my steadfast love from him like I did from Saul. God guarantees David that he will have descendants to sit on the throne. And so even though Solomon basically follows the same path as Saul at the end of his life, Solomon's son Rehoboam takes the throne. He sits on the throne over all Israel. But remember, another man has been told by the Lord that God's going to give him 10 of the tribes of Israel. Remember that guy? What's his name? Remember him? Jeroboam, right? And so you're going to have to keep this in mind. Rehoboam is the son of Solomon, the grandson of David. Jeroboam has been a faithful servant of Solomon, leading some of the armies and so forth, but he has been told, you're destined to be the king of 10 of the tribes of Israel. But how's this going to happen? So Rehoboam takes the throne and he's ruling over all of Israel. This comes into 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12. And so what happens is he's sitting on the throne, some of the people from Israel come to him, and they say in verse 4, 1 Kings 12:4, your father made our yoke heavy, right? So your father, Solomon, put a yoke like that would be like an oxen, and it was really heavy, a heavy yoke on our shoulders. Now listen, Rehoboam, you lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you. So you give us a easier, a lighter yoke, and we will serve you. And so Rehoboam goes away for 3 days to think about this. Is he going to continue in the steps of his father, putting the people to hard labor, or will he listen to the people who say, if you'll just rule us kindly, then we'll be your servants? So Rehoboam takes counsel. And he gathers some of the older men, some of the wise men, some of the men who had probably learned a lot from Solomon, people who had great experience. And he asks them, how do you men advise me to answer the people? And they said to him, listen to this, 1 Kings 12 verse 7. They tell Rehoboam, if you as king will be a servant to this people today, and serve them and speak good words to them when you answer them, then they will be your servants forever. You see that? So the people are asking for a king who will not give them a heavy yoke. And the old men say, listen to the people, and you as king over the people, take the place of servant and serve the people today. And you'll win them, and they will be your servants forever. But what happens? Verse 8, 1 Kings 12:8. But Rehoboam abandoned the counsel that the old men gave him, and he took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him. And he says, hey guys, all of his friends, all of his buddies say, what do you guys think? The old guys say, I should be kind and serve the people. What do you guys think? And listen to what they say. Think this is good advice? They say, verse 10, this is how you need to speak to the people who said to you, things are so hard under your dad. Make it easier for us. This is what you need to tell them. Tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's thighs. Pretty good, right? And now, whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. So Rehoboam listens, right, to his buddies, rejects the counsel of his father's trusted advisors who are full of wisdom. He takes the counsel of his peers and he goes to the people and he tells them all of this great stuff. I mean, you can imagine these pictures. You guys want an easy thing? My little finger, bigger than my daddy's thighs. And what do you think the people do? Of course, they rebel. They don't want to have a king like this. So he did not listen. But look at 1 Kings 12:15. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by the Lord, so that God could fulfill his word that he spoke to Jeroboam. Now this right here, God is turning the heart of the king to accomplish his purposes, to fulfill his word that he spoke by his prophet to Jeroboam, that Jeroboam would sit on a throne over 10 of the tribes. This is what you're going to see throughout all of the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. So I'm going to tell you up front, I can't go through in this study everything that goes on in Kings, but I love the books of Kings. In fact, for me and my wife, these are probably our favorite Old Testament books. And a lot of it I'm going to leave to you to go through and read on your own, but always pay attention to whenever God says something specifically, always see, does that thing happen? And then pay attention for whenever the author says this. He says, this thing happened to fulfill what was spoken back there. That's what's happening right here. God turns the heart of the king, King Rehoboam, so that he listens to the foolish counsel of his peers, and it destroys the unity of the kingdom of Israel. A unity that has been established over the course of 80 years of pretty good rule. Yeah, David and Solomon had their issues, but these guys ruled pretty well. And for about 80 years, the kingdom prospers and is a blessing to many, many people. And then because of Solomon's rebellion, and now because of Rehoboam's foolishness, the kingdom is fracturing. So verse 16 says, and when all Israel saw that the king didn't listen to them, the people answered the king, what portion do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, look now to your own house, David. So Israel went to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah. All right. Now, Rehoboam sees that a lot of the people no longer want to follow him. And so he decides, I'm going to try to attack with my men who are still faithful to me to try to reunite the kingdom. So he gathers 180,000 warriors to go and to attack what's being called now Israel, who has just now come under the reign of, who do you guess? Of Jeroboam. See, this happens 1 Kings 12:20. When all Israel heard that Jeroboam came back, they sent and called him and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David except for the tribe of Judah. So now you've got 10 tribes under the king Jeroboam. This is all in the north, and only one tribe is left for Rehoboam, the actual descendant of David, the son of Solomon. And that's the tribe of Judah, the tribe from which David came. And you say, but wait a second, 10 plus 1, that equals 11. There are 12 tribes. That's because Benjamin is really, really small. Benjamin and Judah are together down in the south. This is exactly what God said. But Rehoboam, again, he wants to try to reunite the kingdom, so he gathers 180,000 men to go up and fight. But before he gets there, the Lord speaks to Rehoboam through Shemaiah, another man of God, another prophet, and says, do not go up and fight. This fracturing of the kingdom is from me. And so they listen this time to the word of the Lord, and they go home again. But again, so here's the situation, right? Because I want to help you to be able to read the rest of the story. We're taking some time here to think about Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, the son of David. He's the Davidic king. He now, after listening to the horrible counsel of his peers, has only Judah to rule over, along with little Benjamin, right? He's lost most of the kingdom. Jeroboam has been anointed or made the new king over the 10 northern tribes of Israel. And if he will listen to the word of the Lord, we heard this before from the prophet, if he'll listen to the word of the Lord, God will establish his kingdom in the north. Okay, but as you read forward, and it's already coming out in the text here, the 10 tribes to the north that are under Jeroboam are going to be called Israel. Okay, up until this point in the story, from like Exodus, going back to Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, right? And then Exodus, where the people of Israel come out of Egypt, all the way to this point, Israel was being used to refer to the whole people, the whole kingdom under Saul and David and Solomon. But now, as you keep reading, Israel refers to the northern 10 tribes that are now under the reign of Jeroboam. What do you suppose the southern kingdom is now going to be called? It's going to be called Judah, under the reign of the Davidic king, the descendant of David, Rehoboam, his grandson, the grandson of David, right? So Israel is in the north. That's the northern kingdom. Judah is in the south. That is the southern kingdom. Israel is under Jeroboam. Judah is under Rehoboam. But that's where you find the Davidic king, and that's where you find Jerusalem. That's where you find the temple. That's where all the people from all of the kingdoms need to come if they're Jewish, right? To worship is in Jerusalem, and they're supposed to come there multiple times a year. And you got to start asking yourself, if you're Jeroboam ruling up in the north, and all of your new people in the northern kingdom have to go down to Jerusalem repeatedly every year to worship, what might you be worried about when they go down there and they see the temple and they worship? What do you think your people might be tempted to do when they have to keep going down to Jerusalem to meet with God? We'll pick up there next time.